I think Christmas is a little predictable. It's a lot of things, but it's predictable. It's the same music, the same ideas, the same story, same movies, food, attire. It's predictable. And for some of you, that's charming. The older you get, you want things predictable. Everything's changing. You want something that isn't. But if you're younger, it's boring. You want something new. If you're a pastor and you preach on it 4 times a year, or about 150 times so far in my career, and when you consider that most of those sermons have come from only 2.5 chapters in the Bible, they were, well, predictable. And if you're a parent, it's hard because you're trying to stir up interest in your kids who, well, they know the story. I know when our kids were small, we were always trying to whip up something new that they hadn't heard before, but they'd heard it all before. I was writing parables of Christmas. I was inventing games, writing quizzes. In the pastor's home, you have quizzes at Christmas. It's a pretty sick way to think about Christmas. We were reenacting it every year, flip a coin, who gets to be Mary and who gets to be the donkey. And this year, Nick, you're the donkey. And that worked until Mary started beating the donkey, and he said, the devotions are over here. You're looking for something new. Last Christmas is the origin of this year's Advent for me. Lori and I were sitting in a living room without a Christmas tree, no lights, no music, no kids, no stockings, no bustle. We wanted it that way. Simple, we said. And in the quiet, we sat there and just started talking about our lives. And they were somewhere in between predictable and boring. Lori said, I think she wanted normalcy. Why don't you take the Bible and read the story? That's what we normally do. So I reached for the Bible and considered my options. And in those days, there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. You know that one? No, I ruled it out. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. Lori's not a contemplative, so I ruled that out. Galatians says, in the fullness of time, God sent his Son, born of a woman. That's a good sermon. It's a horrible devotional. I ruled that one out. Those living in the land of darkness, finally, out of desperation, I said, let's do something we've never done before. I started reading from Revelation chapter 1. And I, John, was on the island of Patmos. It was the Lord's day. I was in the Spirit. And I heard a loud voice, like a trumpet, behind me. And it says, write in a scroll the things that you see and send it to the churches. And I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and there among 7 lampstands was one like the Son of Man. His head and his hair were white like wool, white as the snow. And his eyes were on fire. His feet were like bronze, glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like Niagara. It was like the sound of waves crashing on the shore. In his hand there were 7 stars. Out of his mouth came a double-edged sword. And his face was like the sun. You couldn't look at it. It was brilliant. And when I saw him, I went over and fell at his feet like I was dead. And he came and placed his hand on me, and he said, "Don't be afraid. I'm the first, the last, the beginning, the end. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I'm alive forever. And I hold keys of death and the grave." I stopped reading. There was a long silence, and Lori said, "Wow." Like nothing we've heard before at Christmas. And right then, you guys, I started thinking that might be what we need at Christmas. Because I think the images that we have of Jesus, while charming, are safe. And I'm beginning to think that what is needed is not more stories of one who is just like you, but images of one who is not like you. Maybe what's needed is an image of Christ that is almost terrifying. Because if he doesn't scare you, he doesn't scare your enemies either. Maybe we need an image of Christ that is bigger than the stuff we face every day. So I started wondering if you could read Advent through Revelation. First, it seemed like a bad idea. Then I noticed they have a lot in common. In both of them, there is a king and a savior who is disarming. In Christmas, he's a child in a manger, and in Revelation, he's a lamb slaughtered on a throne. And in neither case does he force the world to worship him, but in both cases, they do anyway. When the Magi come from the Far East, they are thoroughly not Jewish, and they bow down and worship at his feet. It's like they can feel Revelation coming at infinite speed. For in Revelation, there is a day when all of the nations come and bow down at his feet. At Christmas, there is a king who wants to kill the child when it's born. And in Revelation, there is a dragon who wants to kill the child when it is born. And in both cases, Christmas and Revelation, the beginning and the end of the story, the child survives. The king and the dragon are taken away, and the kingdom is handed to the child. And he rules the world. So I went back to Revelation and I started looking for images. Are there pictures of Jesus in Revelation that could save Christmas, which is somewhere between predictable and boring? I found 7 to 10 of them. I picked 4. One in chapter 1, another in chapter 5, a third in chapter 12, and a fourth in chapter 19. The first one is the only one I'm going to talk about right now. It's in Revelation chapter 1. John says, "I was on the island of Patmos. It was the Lord's day. I heard a loud voice behind me, and when I turned to see the voice, I saw one like the Son of Man. There is the picture right there. I saw one like a Son of Man. Comes straight from the book of Daniel. Daniel 7, if you're keeping score. In Daniel 7, this boy prodigy is in exile. He's in a prison sort of atmosphere. It's a situation. And while he's there, he has a vision. In the vision, he sees 4 images rising from the sea: a lion, a bear, a leopard, and then the 4th one coming from the sea, he calls a beast more ferocious than the previous 3, one that devours and destroys its victims. It's interesting here that Daniel is not seeing prophecy, he's seeing history. For the 4 beasts coming out of the sea represent 4 empires that will come over the next 400 years, one after the other. You know of tyrants in the world today. You know today of nations that are trying to destroy other nations. You read about this in the news. Daniel said each one of those nations or empires is like a beast. One will follow the other, and each one will be more ferocious and powerful than the previous one, until the 4th one is more ferocious than any. While Daniel in the vision is watching these beasts rise in their power, he sees one called the Ancient of Days suddenly stand in the midst of all of these kings and tyrants, and the Ancient of Days starts to establish his own throne. He doesn't wait for the tyrants to go away. He establishes his kingdom in the midst of all of the chaos and destruction. And while Daniel is watching, the court is convened, the books are opened, and judgment begins. And judgment comes in the form of one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds. He comes straight into the presence of the Ancient of Days. And instead of competing with him, the Ancient of Days gives him power and glory and authority. And he gives him dominion over all the earth, and he gives him a kingdom that will never fade away. Daniel is so startled by the vision that he wakes up. He says at the end of Daniel 7, "My heart was deeply disturbed, my face was pale. But I told the story to no one." In fact, no one told the story for 200-300 years. Finally, the faithful people of God started picking up the story. There would be one like the Son of Man who would someday appear. And when he appeared, he would set up his throne in the midst of all the other tyrants, and he would crush the opposition. In fact, in the 2nd and 3rd century BC, in the book of Enoch, one of them wrote, "There will come one like the Son of Man, who has the face of a man, but the nature of an angel. Righteousness will dwell with him," he says. This Son of Man will reveal to the faithful things that have been hidden for centuries. And when he comes, he will reign in the power of the strong, and he will break the teeth of sinners. He will bring down the mighty and powerful from their thrones, and he will lift up the humble. And when the world sees him, they will fall down and worship at his feet. And the image worked beautifully for people that were trapped in exile. Because when you're trapped in a prison and you can't get out, and you seem like your work is futile and your prayers are not being answered, You don't need a vision of a child in a manger unless you know who that child is. You need one who is bigger than life. So all of Israel clung to that vision. There is coming one like the Son of Man. And when he comes, he will dominate this earth. When Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, as he did 80 times, he was not breaking the teeth of sinners. He was eating with them, drinking with them. They called him a glutton and a drunkard. They didn't call him Son of Man. The rulers of the world were not bowing at his feet. They rejected him. They were betraying him. They were killing him on a cross. The Son of Man wasn't possessing the earth. He didn't have a place to lay his head. It's hard to imagine the contrast between the one they expected and the one that actually came. Here in Jesus, both of these are true. He is completely at home in heaven, and he is completely at home on earth. He belongs to both places. But it is hard to hold those two ideas in your head at the same time. You will always defer to one. And what has happened recently is that we have deferred to the one from earth. And as I said a moment ago, this works beautifully for a while. If you're John, you're on the island of Patmos. It's the Lord's day. Patmos is a prison. You're there because of your testimony of Jesus Christ. On Patmos, you can do anything you want, but nothing that you do matters. You're there because it's a prison. You are abandoned, unwanted, forgotten, unseen. When you pray, it's like no one is there. Patmos is not just an island. It's a situation. It's futility, silence, abandonment, loneliness. She sits in the office and says to me, I'm praying regularly. Look, I even write them. But I don't think anybody hears them. Pastor, what is the difference between a God who never answers and no God at all? He stands in the atrium and says, my work is boring me, and I'm good at it. But it feels like it's not going anywhere. It's not doing anything. It doesn't have any consequence in the world. I feel every week like I'm just keeping the wolf out the door. But I'm not really making a difference. It's futility. That is Patmos. And when you're on Patmos, what you need to hear is not just Almighty God came and laid in a manger. Good as that is, that manger becomes a kind of box and he never gets out of it. What you need is an image of one who is standing behind you, always was, shouting from the past. Write down what you see and hear and send it to the faithful. You need to turn and see one whose eyes are like fire and whose voice is like Niagara. You need one whose voice thunders like ocean waves. You need a God that is not safe. Good, but not safe. Not domesticated. Kind, but not timid. Wild and free. You need a God that is bigger than life. So I'm taking a chance this year in Advent. I worried I'd ruin it for you. Because oddly enough, we still want pictures that bore us. And I want to give you 4 images of someone who is terrifying and yet full of love and power. I want to give you one that is bigger than anything you're facing now. One that makes you fall down and worship. I wonder if you would close your eyes and let me give to you the one who is worthy. Church, whatever is wrong, whatever you're afraid of, whatever you can't get over, whatever bores you, He is the image of the invisible God. He is the firstborn over all creation, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and things on earth, things that are visible and invisible, whether thrones, powers, rulers, tyrants, authorities. All of these things have been created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. For God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things. This man is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And after he provides purification for sins, he went and sat down at the right hand of majesty in heaven. He is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end, the one who is and who was and who is to come. He is the Almighty. He is the first and last. He is the living one. He is the one who was dead, and look, he is alive forevermore. He is Jesus.